Kemi Badenoch. I think she made some terrible mistakes over the festive period. She engaged with Nigel Farage. The first rule of politics is don't engage with the enemy on their own turf, which is essentially what she did. Let's just look at the front page of the Daily Telegraph, because I've been wondering about Labour, its problem, the mega poll we talked about yesterday. But Elon Musk today, and you've probably seen this on the front page of the Daily Telegraph, Elon Musk says few companies would be willing to invest in Starmer's Britain. Look, Keir Starmer has made economic growth a cornerstone of his new administration. He says we're going to make the UK one of the most accessible places to invest, whilst putting in up employers' national insurance, of course, attacking various sectors of society and the economy. And Elon Musk said that very few businesses would want to invest. He says that Starmer is putting off wealth creators. Is he right?
I think he is, because it's all about trust in politics and trust in the economy. And if you've spent the last however many months, particularly throughout July, the general election, saying we're not going to put taxes up on, we're not going to increase national insurance, VAT, or income tax, and then one of the very first things that you do in your budget is put up national insurance contributions on employers, on business.
But we didn't break that. We didn't break what we said. But you broke the spirit of it.
Exactly. Taking the public for a ride like that, the public won't allow that to happen, which is why I think they're so damaged in the polls. But I think, look, if you are a business, even if you got behind Labour, who they wooed for so long, Labour, to say, look, those Tories, look, they've taken us up to the highest tax burden, they've not got to cut your taxes, we can be the party of business again. They wooed them no end and promised them not to put up national insurance contributions. To then do that trust is broken. And you're right, when it comes to business, they are the wealth creators of this country. They are the next, that's where you're going to get your next job, your next employer on the books. So there is a lack of trust. So why would anybody looking at the UK today think to themselves, you know what, where is the best place to start a company? Where can I thrive? It is certainly not in Starmer's Tax UK.
No, and this all is on the back of Ash Regan, who has written to Elon Musk saying, please open a Tesla factory in Scotland. He had previously said, actually, the UK is one of the countries that I may well look at across Europe. He's talking about this big gigafactory he'll build in Europe. But you're right. Why would you choose this country? Surely what we need to do is to cut tax, make it much more accessible and open to investment, get those big multinationals in, but at the same time actually looking after the SMEs, those small, medium enterprises. And this is, the proof of the pudding is in the eating thereof. And if these companies don't invest in Britain, it will be down to the economic trading conditions imposed by this government.
Absolutely. And, when you've staked your whole government on the idea of growth in the economy, and then to have growth already downgraded from 0.3%, which I know is not a huge amount anyway, but to zero by the Bank of England, that speaks volumes. But you're right, because where does the government go from here? And I understand, and of course there'll be a whole separate debate about why taxes were so high, and people can argue we've had a pandemic and far too high, and we had a pandemic and that has to be paid for, and there are backlogs.
Badly managed pandemic.
Taxes had to go up, and we've had a lot of costs that we've got to pay for. But what do you then do in the future? And this is the choice. This government has decided to tax and borrow and spend to deal with those backlogs or those public services. And if you're a business today seeing taxes increase, where does the government go from there? Even if you do invest, you bet your bottom dollar the government is going to be coming to you next at the next budget to say, we've taxed at the last budget, we need a bit more money, so we're going to come after you again. And if you can see that trajectory, why on earth would you start a business in the UK today?
I mean, it's a brilliant point. And actually, I've heard from tons of people who are very small companies who work all hours to try and keep that company afloat. And they say we simply can't afford to employ people because of employers' national insurance. Now, interestingly, in the mega poll, which came out yesterday, this is the first poll we've seen, actually, since Labour has been in power. This will make very difficult reading for the Labour Party, because they go from having 411 seats, essentially they are now projected to drop to 228, putting them pretty much level pegging with the Conservative Party. Reform, this is quite interesting actually, going up to 72 seats, the Lib Dems at 58, and that's quite interesting. I didn't mention this yesterday, but we aren't hearing a lot about the Lib Dems, are we?
No. And I think
we did at the stunts.
Yes.
But we no longer do.
I think that's right. I think the difficulty, I think, in with the Lib Dems is that the majority of their seats are from the southwest. I mean, and there's a couple in the home counties. I accept that, but the majority are in the southwest. So it's the Somersets, the Devons, the Cornwalls, Dorsets, and so. They staked their whole campaign on particular issues, particularly around the environment. So pumping waste into the water, obviously a failed Tory government, and if you're not going to vote Labour, and by the way, if you're a voter in the southwest, you voted for the Lib Dems because you couldn't vote Tory. You certainly didn't vote for the Labour Party because you might have seen what was coming in terms of the attack on farmers. So where do you go if you're a voter that was Tory, now Lib Dem, at the next election, when, as you say, you haven't heard from Sir Ed Davey for some time, where that is an area which I think needs a lot more work to understand what do voters actually need from the southwest. Where will they go next?
And a lot of the southwest is rural. I'm from the east of England. Of course, that is very rural. When you look at the ratings, Sir Keir Starmer has been warned, they are catastrophic in countryside voters. And I've spoken a lot about this, the disconnect between the Islingtonian dinner party circle here in London and actually what is going on the ground. And so just the inheritance tax stuff with farmers, they keep saying, well, it only affects a few farms. It won't affect the vast majority of farms. And anyway, you need to get around it. I saw loads of comments yesterday saying, well, you get around it by bequeathing the farm 7 years before you die. Well, it's not that easy, actually. It's much more complicated than that. But there is also a much bigger issue here, which is actually in a time of increasing insecurity, the one thing we learned many years ago was you need food security. And so if you are going to penalise the farms, they'll be selling those farms off or parts of those farms off to pay this, because remember, farmers are asset rich.
Yes.
They're not cash rich.
Yeah, exactly. Asset rich, cash poor. That is exactly right. And I think, if I was, I always try and look at these things through the prism of if I was sort of still there, as a former advisor. I mean, I know former for a reason, obviously. You
were very good.
But I left long before. I think
it's not your fault.
Things took a turn for the worse. But I would be sitting there every day if I was back in the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs or the Cabinet Office. I would literally be wanting to pull everybody together and say, how is it still today? However many weeks on from the budget, where there's still this issue rumbles on, that we still have the discrepancy between the National Farmers Union and farmers up and down this country saying that there are 75,000 farms that are affected versus the Treasury's 500. Something doesn't add up. Something is not right.
But go to any farm.
Well, yes.
They're all over £1 million. I just don't understand how the government can say there are only 500 farms that are affected.
Yes, exactly. So that's why you must then assume that the NFU have got more than a point, but they've got a point. So how do we square this circle? How do we do it quickly? And how do we then present that to the country to say, what we've... And you can ham it all up. You can say, look, we've got a terrible black hole to fill. We've got to make tough decisions. But on this particular occasion, we understand the strength of feeling. We understand the need for food security, which is exactly what you've just said, because you need to keep food on people's table, particularly over Christmas, when people are doing a big food shop, so the headlines can write themselves in a negative way for this government. But the humility to be able to go to the country and say, we've listened, we've tried, we've made a mistake, or we can fix it, and we're going to fix it. That's what earns you the respect in office in government. Just saying, nothing to see here.
Do you think that would change the fortunes of the Labour Party if they were to do that and to say we got this wrong?
I think it would. Yes, of course it would, because they're a new government.
So why don't they do it?
Well, that is a question, because it's, of course, you want to come in on if you've got such a majority, you want to come in with the strength and the guts to say, right, we're doing X, Y, Z, and the Tories, terrible Tories of the past, we're changing everything. We are the vote for the future. That's what people voted for, a change in direction, and we're providing that change. And you've got to present strength as a new government, but you've only got a small window of opportunity as a new government to say, we're new as well, and we understand why people voted for change, but we're still new at this. We've got to make tough decisions. This one we've got, wrong, or we're prepared to look again. I think they should have done that when it comes to winter fuel allowance as well, by the way, but they've missed that opportunity. There's only so many chances you've got, and it's when you're a young government that I think you can say, you know what, we said we would be more in touch with the people, we said we would protect farms, we've made a bit of a mistake here, we're correcting it, and we can move on.
I mean, it's fascinating. How much longer can the government get away with blaming the last lot? Because that narrative is wearing very thin. I think many people who've contacted me, certainly on my show, have said they can't keep hiding behind this. Where is the vision and optimism to drive the country forward? What is interesting to me, when you ask, and this is a poll by Public First, said to people around the country, who do you trust the most with regards to the countryside? And top of that, and I was surprised by this, was the Conservative Party.
Yes, because I think there's still an element of, particularly within Conservative Party circles and Conservative voters, or Conservative thinking voters, Conservative by their outlook rather than political party affiliation, is, it is protecting the countryside because it's about, yes, farms, but also housing, which is actually one of the biggest issues, because obviously we need more homes to be built. And one of the problems that the Tory government got into was the inability to find a formula to actually build over and above the number of homes that we actually need. 300,000 a year, I mean, is a target that nobody seems to be able to reach. 1.5 million over the next Parliament, but that is a drop in the ocean.
Correct. And particularly when you've got 1 million people coming in thereabouts. So, and you're saying, right, we're going to build 1.5 million homes over 5 years. Well, I mean, sorry, what about all the people in this country who already need a house? So you're right, it's a drop in the ocean.
It is, and that's why I think that trust is so broken. That's why the poll that came out the other day, you're right, is so important, because people are really seriously looking at alternative parties. They're fed up of the two-party system. They're fed up of being lied to or being misled.
I mean, frank lies, aren't they?
Yes, yeah. I mean, totally. I mean, I just cannot work out, just with all of the communications of the current government, what it is that they're doing, and how on earth they think that it's been a good few months for them.
And so one of the other dynamics that's important is those MPs who are MPs for the first time, who are representing rural communities, 135 of them and thereabouts, are going to be sitting there over New Year thinking, well, I might not be in position very long if this continues. There is also something else which I think I actually would welcome, I think, which is the farmers are saying we saw the tractors in Westminster not that long ago. They are now threatening a New Year supermarket blockade to say, OK, play it your way. We are not going to deliver food. We will not take it to the supermarkets, to the distribution centres. And I'll tell you how quickly those supermarket shelves empty. Very quickly.
Yes. And that, again, will be obviously terrible headlines for this government. The public will obviously wake up and smell the coffee that they can't get. Well, they'll get their coffee, but they won't be able to get their breakfast.
Yes, exactly.
I can't imagine. So the public will be on side of the farmers, because people will have to sit up and listen. And at some stage, there'll have to be, some give to give. And I'm afraid I think it will be the government that has to make it climb down. But why has it got to be in that way? Why has it got to get to that particular stage?
Because they want to show that they are right. They want to show a solid government, a powerful government, a decisive government. Actually, what they're doing is they're burying their head in the sand.
Yes, yeah. And it's just, again, a decision that seems to have been taken on a piece of paper or something that Treasury officials might have just put to the Chancellor. I think because I've heard through the rumblings in certain column pieces that this is not a new proposal. It's something that's come up before previous Chancellors, but other previous Chancellors have said no. I think your figures are wrong, but this Chancellor has obviously gone with it, and now we are where we are.
So the date to watch, by the way, I think is January the 25th or thereabouts. I think they're planning this day of action, January 25th. This is alongside the NFU farming groups, and obviously in areas like mine, Suffolk, farming makes up the bulk of that economy. And of course, I'm very aware. I live in the middle of a rural area, and you realise how hard these farmers work, and the way that you have crop rotation, for example, and they're constantly out on the land. They don't make a huge amount of money, and I think people, when they wander around Waitrose or Tesco, and particularly if you live in the city, you don't understand the journey that food has been on, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. And just to your point earlier on, farmers are in communities, and they are part of the community, a big part of the community, and everybody, if you're in a rural area, tends to know who their local farm is and their local farmers, and it's a bit like the local pub. If you're trying to close the local pub or impact on the local pub...
Which they've done to mine.
And then, rightly say, the public go berserk over it. I mean, because it's that centrist, metropolitan, Islington dinner party set that is making the decisions impacting on rural communities, and the rural communities won't stand for it.
So just before the break, let me ask you the question I want to ask everyone else. Labour's in trouble, I think, actually, at the moment. So just in terms of that, what is the biggest threat to Labour? Is it the Conservative Party? Is it Reform? Is it the farmers? Is it Elon Musk? What's the biggest threat?
In the short term, the farmers, because obviously they've got the protests coming in the new year, and that will be obviously headline news and huge damage to the reputation of the government. In the long term, Reform. I think, Elon Musk, it's a great story, and, people will, he's the richest man in the world, I think, and, he's pledging to donate to a political party in the UK, has some tweets here and there, which people can debate over, but, that's a long term, whatever happens, but, in the short term, definitely the farmers, in the medium term, certainly it's reform, because reform will be sweeping up votes in that, it is, what reform are doing is forming that coalition that was there in 2019 in the north and the south, and where people are fed up of the two-party system of the Labour Party and what the Labour government are doing, and the Tories who haven't been able to maybe articulate the errors of the past as yet, and Kemi hasn't had that much time to do so, so let's see how that runs. But in the interim, there is a vacuum and a void, and when you've got a communicator like Nigel Farage, that's the guy who's filling it.
Charlie, thanks for one moment.